You're live.
Okay, thank you. Hello, folks. Oh, I've got a loud sound here. I don't know why.
You're live.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Probably coming from your other
Hello,
computer.
folks. Okay, there we go. Hello, folks. I'm sorry, I've got some extra things going on here. Hi, I'm Parson Michael, and welcome to Sacred Ground Community Church and Sangha. We are a spiritual community melding East and West, melding earth and sky. We draw from the beneficial teachings of Buddhism and Christianity, as well as an earth centered spirituality. And this is our meditative, mindful Bible study. And we'll be drawing from the idea of Lectio Divinae, from the tradition of engaging the Bible prayerfully. And you can see our past episodes also up here on our YouTube live channel. And today we're going to be focusing on Psalm 143 as well as Luke chapters 15 and 16. So I'll begin with, as we begin many of our programs, with the singing bowl. And boy, I was a little bit off today. It was like about quarter till four, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get ready. I was doing some other things, so if I'm a little wackier than usual, that's why. But the bell is good for me to help me get present, help me get mindful, and it's an invitation for you as well. If you're watching live on YouTube, you can comment in the I think there's a chat or comment section on YouTube, and we'll try to respond to those as we're working together. There's also an option for those of you who are on our email list to join us via Zoom. So this is also streaming live on Zoom. So without further ado, here's the bell, and we're invited into this present moment to enjoy the sound of the bell. It, it doesn't always come to me like this, but I'm reminded of when I was a boy, um, often attended Roman Catholic Church, the Holy Trinity Church in Struthers, Ohio, and I could remember the sounds of the bells and just, I think it helped me with centering then, even as a child. So we're going to enter into a little bit of a meditation, and everything is an invite. Everything is invitational. So you're invited into the meditation, and you're welcome to just sit back and observe, but you're also welcome to participate. So I'm going to invite that bell to sound one more time because I just really, and I'm going to take a little sip of my water. To help me gain presence here. I'm not quite sure what the mic picks up, but we're on the plane path here in our home, so I'm hearing the planes overhead. So you might hear other sounds. You might hear a bird song. You might hear children playing in the next room. And again, we don't have to push those aside, but we can take them all in as part of our experience today. So I invite you to sit in a way that's comfortable for you. And if you'd like, Again, everything's invitational. I invite you to have your feet flat on the floor. We have an old house here with old hardwood floors, so I took my sandals off. I can feel the coolness of the hardwood underneath my feet. I invite you to become aware of your hands, just where you place your hands. Just bring a little awareness to your hands. And next, I invite you to bring a little awareness to your breathing. As you breathe in and out. And as you breathe in, just aware of that breath filling up your lungs, breathing into all four sides of your torso, and then breathing out with a release, and you might want to let your shoulders drop down a little bit, often a place of tension for people. Breathing in and out. Breathing in calmly. Breathing out slowly. Breathing in this present moment. And breathing out. And this is a wonderful moment. In, out, deep, slow, present, wonderful. I invite you now to notice any place in your body where you might be constricting, where you might be clenching. I'm feeling a little tension in my hips right now. You might feel it in your jaw, your shoulders, your lower back, even in your feet and toes. And bring a little kind of gentle attention to that place where you're clenching. And smile and begin to release. You may not be able to completely let go, but you can smile. Begin to release. Smile. Could be a little half smile or inner smile. And release. Look to my side here. I have the oh, there we are. I'm going to bring up the YouTube channel so that I can see if people are commenting here. Hopefully I'll be able to see it. There's a little bit of a time delay, but hopefully I'll be able to see that. And Miss Ollie may also let me know if she's able to tune in. As I said, we're going to begin with Psalm 143 today. We have 12 sessions here in the fall. We're going from Psalm 139 to 150. And this is our first Bible study that we've done, but we decided to just start with this to kind of start with the end of the Psalms, if you will. And we read, when we share the Psalms, we sometimes use the King James Version, sometimes use the New Revised Standard Version, and I oftentimes like to read a couple of different versions, and that's what I'll do today. So I'll start with Psalm 143, and I'm going to I'll read the New Revised Standard Version first, then the King James. Sometimes that helps in terms of our understanding with the old language of, the King James. And a lot of people struggle with the Bible. right? There's a lot in there that I don't like. We'll find that even in Psalm 143, perhaps. What makes it sacred text? Well, for me, it's not that it offers a perfect sacrality, a perfect sacred teaching, but what makes it sacred text for me is the genuineness, the authenticity that, in this case, the psalmist, whomever the writer is, the gospel writer, Paul, the authenticity that they bring to it. And here we have some authentic pain. This one is entitled Prayer for Deliverance from Enemies. And I've mentioned before, we can think of this as external enemies, but we can also think of it as the enemies within. Within Buddhist tradition, the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh will tell us that the real enemies are fear, anxiety, anger, jealousy. And so we can think of those as well and find spiritual or symbolic meanings. And sometimes people treat those as less than. But we know people who have been so debilitated, maybe ourselves, struck by what fear or anger or anxiety has done to us. So I don't think of these as less than. These are real, genuine enemies. They just happen to be internal to us. So with all that, and probably more than I needed to say, I'll invite the bell to sound again, and then I'll give us a first reading of Psalm 143 from the New Revised Standard Version. And my aspiration is to offer a prayerful reading for us to enter into the rhythms of it. And you don't even have to attend with your mind so much as, I think I said this last week or the week before, to just let the words wash over you and see what happens, see what comes to mind. The bell and then the reading, Psalm 143. You may also hear the train going by. We live next to the train tracks. Here comes the train and the bell. Enjoy both. A Psalm of David. Hear my prayer, O Lord. Give ear to my supplications in your faithfulness. Answer me in your righteousness. Do not enter into judgment with your servant, for no one living is righteous before you. For the enemy has pursued me, crushing my life to the ground, making me sit in darkness like those long dead. Therefore my spirit faints within me. My heart within me is appalled. I remember the days of old. I think about all your deeds. I meditate on the works of your hands. I stretch out my hands to you. My soul thirsts for you like a parched land, Selah. Answer me quickly, O Lord. My spirit fails. Do not hide your face from me, or I shall be like those who go down to the pit. Let me hear of your steadfast love in the morning, for in you I put my trust. Teach me the way I should go, for to you I lift up my soul. Save me, O Lord, from my enemies. I have fled to you for refuge. Teach me to do your will, for you are my God. Let your good spirit lead me on a level path. For your name's sake, O Lord, preserve my life. In your righteousness, bring me out of trouble. In your steadfast love, cut off my enemies and destroy all my adversaries. for I am your servant. I invite you into the space of silence to just let it sit with you. Looks like Sarah might be joining us here. Verse 2 reads, "Do not enter into judgment with your servant." In other words, Lord, do not judge me, for no one living is righteous before you. And as I said at the outset, we see this full range within the psalmist. At one point, demanding, "Answer me quickly, O Lord. My spirit fails." But then in other places, there's a humility. Teach me the way I should go. Teach me to do your will. But then again, with this suffering, this anger pops up again. Destroy all my adversaries. As I said at the beginning, we can sit and critique all that, but I find it interesting to think about myself or a friend or family member when they've been in a rough spot. Don't we get that full range from people? There's a desperate calling forth, there's fear, there's anger, and then there's also asking for help. Rather than critiquing it, we can see the genuineness, the genuine emotion, and the emotional range in this. I'm going to read through, kind of picking out a word here or there. This is part of that Lectio Divina, kind of entering into the words as meditation. Not just, here's the meaning, there's the meaning, but more feeling. And as we take it in, and Sarah said this a couple of weeks ago, how is this relevant to me? How does this relate to what I'm going through right now in my life? Or does it? Because that's ultimately the aspiration here, right? So he begins by saying, "Hear my prayer, O Lord," and I'm going to ring the bell, and then I'm going to read this slowly, bits and pieces, as prayer. And as I read the bits and pieces, I think I'll go over to the King James Version, and then I'll come back to the New Revised Version. Again, I'll start with the bell. And it's always an invitation into mindfulness. Hear my prayer, O Lord. my spirit overwhelmed within me, my heart desolate. I remember the days of old. I meditate. I muse on the work of thy hands. The work of thy hands. I stretch forth my hands. Thy hands, my hands. My soul thirsteth. Cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning. Deliver me. Teach me. Teach me. Teach me to do thy will. Lead me into the land of uprightness. Bring my soul out of trouble. Bring my soul out of trouble. I remember the days of old. I remember. I think about all your deeds. All your deeds. I meditate on the works of your hands. Meditate on your hands. I meditate on your hands. I meditate on the Lord's hands. I meditate on the works of the Lord's hands. The Lord's hands. The Lord's hands. I stretch out my hands to you. My hands to your hands. Your hands to my hands. My hand to your hand. I stretch out my hands. Our hands. Your hands. Teach me the way I should go. Teach me. Teach me. What way should I go? Teach me. Teach me to do your will. Teach me. Teach me. Teach me. Teach me your will. Bring me out of trouble. Bring me and teach me. Teach me. Bring me out of trouble. The work of your hands. I meditate on the work of your hands. I stretch out my hands to you. Your hands, your deeds, my hands, stretch, stretch. Teach me. So I invite folks who may be watching on YouTube, or Ollie or Sarah, if you have any reflection, any thoughts on Psalm 143 or the Lectio Divinae, that kind of meditating with the psalm, you're welcome to share.
Michael, I can share. Can you hear me? And it says that I can't start my video. It says the host has asked you to start. Oh, okay. Let's see if. Oh, good. Here we go. Sorry, it gets so impersonal. And I know during COVID, when my students wouldn't start their video, I always hated that, but they weren't required to start it. I guess I haven't heard this psalm in a while, and I was trying to look it up online while you were reading it because it helps me to see things written. And I guess I kept on thinking how quick I am to forget about all the wonderful works God has done. I try to think I'm good at it, but I don't think I am. So it gave me time to really like stop and think about it's like overwhelming all the wonderful works. Byron, my dog, was out here in the beginning, and I was just like looking at his fur and his teeth and his ears and how and he's one, you know. Then I was thinking about my parents and how they were made by their parents, and I'm like, they were the most extraordinary people, and I'm like, that's two people. And then I'm thinking like, oh, I'm sitting on my porch, just like the cutest nookish porch, and like the leaves are falling and how beautiful they are as they're dying, which is such a message in itself. And so, but I feel like a lot of times when I'm driving to work in the morning, when I coming home, I'm thinking like about all the problems a lot, you know, in the world, or all the heaviness. I think a lot of us do. So I think it helps stop it. And you had mentioned this before. It's always the both and, you know, where there's joy, there's also pain. But that really helped me to remember and to know that I hope that I want to try and remember more all the good.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I don't know if Ollie's on or if she has anything she'd like to share, but I'll just hold for another minute in case she does.
Yes, I had to go in the other room. I really, really like when you talk about the enemies within. If we read this with the enemies being fear, anxiety, anger, it just changes the meaning completely for me. It really helps me to understand it at a different level, because I can, we talk about external enemies that I put up a wall. I don't want to talk about external enemies so much. So that was one thing that's really poignant. I think mentioning that a lot of the time when you're doing the Bible readings, just have people think about that. And I certainly loved the psalmist prayer. I really like that. That was powerful. So taking the psalm and putting it into prayer. So.
Yeah, I'll say a couple words about that. The kind of the internal enemies. So we don't know. Sometimes it seems like they're really dealing with internal enemies. Sometimes it seems external. But even if the original psalmist was talking about these enemies outside of themselves and they held that kind of a worldview, it doesn't mean that we can't transpose that into thinking about internal enemies. And nothing is static. Sarah, you were talking about the work of God's hands, and there is nothing. God makes nothing static. There is no tree that is going to look exactly the same today as it did 5 years ago. There's no child. There's no worm. Nothing. The ocean, everything is changing, and it's sort of built that way. And I think we're invited to think about that in terms of our understandings too. So that I really think that part of, at least for me, and again, I'm broadcasting this out, or we're broadcasting this out, sharing this as a possibility. So I just invite people to hold this as possibility, that layers of meaning, and that like Ollie, I sometimes feel, I don't want to look at people as enemies, and I think back to Jesus's words, right? Love your enemies. And I also think of the teaching within Buddhist tradition, and I think it's within Christian tradition as well, of these internal enemies. Actually, in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, they talk of the logismoi, these internal negative things that go on within us, and how do we deal with those? Because really, those are the enemies I mostly have to deal with. I have to deal with those, the negativities within myself, the fears within myself. And so that's just a few words on that. And I really appreciate, Sarah, you talking about, like, oh my gosh, there's so much. I found myself, as you were speaking, I was thinking of like watching a nature program. And every time I watch a nature program, I'm like, oh my gosh, I live on a planet that has these creatures, right? I mean, there are whales whose tongues are the size of elephants. The tongue is the size of an elephant. These are on the planet right now, folks, and so that's the world we live in. I think, as some of you know, we've been doing this. Victoria Loris wrote this wonderful book called Church of the Wild, and we've been following this wild church model where we're getting outside more. And usually when we do wild church, we'll take 10, 15, 20 minutes and just invite everybody to let the Spirit guide you and go out in nature wherever you go. And so I'm doing this with our different programming. I'm doing this 2 or 3 times a week. And what it's reminding me a little bit of is my childhood. Because when we were kids, right? And especially if I didn't grow up in the era of, the internet and computers, and even I'm old enough even before cable TV, so that kids were outside playing, and you get out and you're looking at the clouds and you're seeing all these different images in the clouds, or you're I don't know, just playing outside, and you're interacting with this world, and I don't know, I love that. I love that. So, and there's so much to it. I mean, that's what strikes me when we do this. When we do this little, we call it our sacred saunter time. I'll go sit somewhere underneath a tree, by a little creek or something, and I'll be there for 10 minutes, and I'll see like all this stuff going on in this little space. And I live on this big planet, which is actually a small planet compared to the galaxy, the galaxies upon galaxies. And so it's completely mind-boggling and overwhelming, but it's also really cool to think of. And this is something I love about the Judeo-Christian tradition of, like, somehow we can also talk about, God's hands and our hands. And okay, so God doesn't necessarily, we're shaping God in our image, but there's this idea of connectivity to this great sacred force. So yeah, I'm grateful for all of that.
Michael, thanks for your passion. And I wanted to piggyback on that. Two things. One, yesterday I had to proctor a foreign language test at New Albany. They offer a biliteracy seal test, so it's like a 3 to 4 hour test, and you can take it in all sorts of different languages, and then if you pass it, then you're considered to be bilingual in whatever language you take it in. So I got asked to help proctor, so I did that all day yesterday. And so everyone's in a big room, and there's all different languages that are being tested at the same time. You just go into the app on the computer, you choose the language that you're going to test on. So people have headsets on and they're speaking in all these languages. So I'm going around and helping students out if they had like questions with the software. I was kind of helping if they had to go to the bathroom, they needed a tissue. And as you're walking through, you're like, okay, that person's speaking Japanese and she's speaking Chinese. And then I'd sit down and kind of take a break a little bit. There was other proctors, but I've always been fascinated with language. I've been fascinated with the English language. In Spanish, the word for people is a singular word. We think that's strange, but our word for deer is singular, and it refers to one animal or more. Like we do it too. And it started getting me thinking yesterday when I was sitting there about these kids that go to school at New Albany that I see in the hallway. I had no idea that Matthias is fluent in German. That's his language at home. I had no idea, that there were multiple students who are totally fluent in Japanese at our high school, Czech, Russian, and they were all getting tested yesterday. Then it started getting me thinking about just languages in general. And I had just read an article recently about how a Chilean indigenous language is, they're doing this whole restoration project to get it back. And they're actually starting to teach it again in schools in Chile. And that started making me think about languages that have passed away and all the different languages. And you can say the word hand and how the different ways to say hand in all these languages. And then it started getting me thinking about God. And I'm like, that's just language. That is just what we say with our mouth. And think about all the ways that we express and talk that don't have anything to do with words. Because I'm reading a children's book. and this girl develops a relationship with a snow leopard, and she has a stutter. The little kid does, the little girl. And she realizes at the end that it's not about speaking perfectly, that she can love and she can offer a lot in the world, just like the snow leopard can. So it started getting me thinking about like that and how rich that is. Just how we communicate is over the top, is mind boggling. And then the second thing while you're talking, I was thinking about caterpillars and how Chris raises the caterpillars. And that I truly spend, I have spent many mornings sitting, having coffee on my porch, seeing a caterpillar change from really tiny to really fat, and actually have watched it actively make a cocoon. And I have actually watched it come out of the cocoon multiple times. And when it comes out, it's wet. It like a liquid comes out, like a birth. And I look at it and I say, I knew you as a caterpillar. I've been hanging out with you every morning. And now this is what you look like? Where do these colors come from? And it takes an hour to 2 hours for it to open up its wings slowly. I used to think when he first started doing this that something was wrong with them. And he was like, no, Sarah, they don't just come out having perfect wings. Oh, yeah, that's right. And that's just moths. And when you think about moth, people aren't putting moths on the hive. People talk about lions and tigers and bears and how great they are, and whales. We aren't talking about the grandiousness of moths, but they really, really are something. So you just made me think about those things. I'm done.
Wow, thank you so much, Sarah. I love it because it's just like, who would guess? You know, you read Psalm 143. Who would guess that you start thinking about, you know, languages and then beyond language and moths and and just like this. I think this openness to the vastness of what, we go to these sacred teachings, but then where do they take us? And they could take us all kinds of places. And so this is just, it's potent for me to just hear you say that. And of course, I mean, we could just riff on this back and forth, because then you have me thinking about, oh my gosh, when I was in Ireland and got to the one little place where they're speaking Irish and not English much, and just like how amazing that was. And then I'm thinking about this little bug that I once saw. I was probably 12 or 13 years old. This little bug I once saw on our driveway, and I had some book and I can't even describe it now, but it had these weird little things that would kind of like feathery, like things that would come out and go back in. And then I found it in some bug book. I found it like, there it is. I've never seen one before. I've never seen one since. They're around, right? And just like I'm looking up there's a calendar here with the ocean and mountains, and just like there's so much. And you were talking earlier, and I think this is so important. The what's wrong in the world. And it's important also for us to give ourselves space to feel and to empathize and to think, is there anything we can do? And we can certainly add our prayers, and sometimes there's actions we can take. But we have a world that's so full of stress and tension. No matter how people are voting, people are so stressed out about this presidential election, and there's so much else in the world that's got us so tensed out. And like we were saying earlier, there always has to be that balance of, the time with the moth, right? The time just saying, I have like kind of just a love from afar of language because I don't have a second language, but I'll sometimes observe two people speaking a language to each other that I don't understand. And it's like, it's incredible to me because it just sounds to me. There's no meaning. And yet I know they're communicating ideas to each other, and Again, and I think that again, that Jesus line about we'll be led by children, because young children have that curiosity about the world. We were doing a Wild Church a couple of weeks ago, and happened to have our 3-year-old granddaughter Saoirse with us, and I picked up an acorn, and we were right next to an oak tree, and I said, Saoirse, one of these made this. And she's just like, whoa. And it's awesome. So yeah, thank you so much. Oh.
By the way, Michael, really fast, you do know Slovak a little bit, don't you? So don't act like you don't, I know that's the music. Don't act like you haven't been exposed. But it's really cool because when you do know another language, I didn't realize that one of the special blessings of it was that you get to learn a different part of yourself. So I feel like when I speak Spanish, I'm not totally me. It's a different part of me, which I didn't even know existed.
I've never heard anyone say that. I know I'm kind of an old guy, but it makes me want to dive back into languages. That's so cool, Sarah. Oh my gosh. Wow. All right. We could stop now, folks, because we just got the big takeaway there. I mean, heck yeah. I'm going to do a little stand up and sort of stretch out. And you're welcome, folks, if you're watching, you're welcome to stretch out as well or not. And then we're going to go into the Gospel of Luke. And we have, we'll share a little story from Luke chapter 16. So I'm going to do this for just a minute. Oh, I'm going to move this. Some of you may know that Ollie and I, we're now trained yoga practitioners. So we most days I do a yoga practice, and I've been very grateful for that. Not going to do a whole lot right here, but we'll just do a little exercise. We can breathe in and raise our arms, and breathe out and bring our hands to prayer position. And then if you'd like, you could lower your head, put your hands behind, and breathe in, raise your arms up, and breathe out, hands back down. We'll try that a couple more times. In, out, hold, in, out, in, out, hold, in, out. Wiggle your fingers down. In, out, hold, in, out. We'll do 2 more, and I won't give any direction on this. I think you probably have it by now. And I'll invite the bell to sound again. And we'll have a reading from, we've been studying the Gospel of Luke. And today we'll read from Luke chapter 16. And we'll start with, we've been, along with the King James Version and the New Revised Standard Version, we've been using a new translation of the Gospels by Sarah Rudin, just to kind of add the richness. Now, most of us know the story from the Gospel of John of Lazarus, who's brought back from the dead. This is a different Lazarus, and this one is unique to the Gospel of Luke. So here is Sarah Rudin's translation of Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. I'll go right from this to reading either the King James or the New Revised. There was a certain rich man, and he habitually dressed in purple and linen, enjoying himself splendidly every day. And a certain beggar, by the name of Lazarus, used to lie at his gate, covered with sores, and longing to fill himself with things that fell from the rich man's table. But instead, the dogs actually came and licked his sores. Then it happened that the beggar died, and was taken up by the messengers to Abraham's embrace. Then the rich man also died and was interred. And in Hades he lifted up his eyes while he was being tortured, and saw Abram far away with Lazarus in his embrace. And he called out and said, "Father Abram, have pity on me and send Lazarus. He could dip his fingertip in water and cool down my tongue, because I'm in agony in these flames." But Abram said, "Child, keep in mind that you got your good things during your life, while Lazarus got only bad things during his. But now he's being consoled here, and you're in agony. And besides all this, between us and all of you, a huge, rock-solid chasm has been built, so that those who might want to step across to you couldn't. And those where you are couldn't cross over from there to us either." But he said, "Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, as I have 5 brothers. I want him to warn them, which could keep them from coming into this place of torture." But Abram said, "They have Moses and the prophets. They'd better listen to them." But he said, "They won't, Father Abram. But if someone makes his way to them from among the dead, they'll change their thinking." But he told him, "If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, even if someone rises from among the dead, they won't be persuaded." I'll read it again this time, sharing Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31 from the New Revised Standard Version. The Rich Man and Lazarus. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in agony in these flames." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us. He said, "Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them so that they will not also come into this place of torment." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them." He said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." He said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." We've heard the Sarah Rudin version and the New Revised Standard Version. Did you have something to share here, Ollie?
No, I was just checking the video. Not yet.
And what I'll do now is, drawing on the King James, I will do a little Lectio Divina where I share not all the words, but a few words from this passage of the rich man and Lazarus. Again, this is Luke chapter 16, verses 19 through 31. A certain rich man fared sumptuously every day. A certain beggar named Lazarus, full of sores. Dogs came and licked his sores. The beggar died and was carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. Carried by the angels into Abraham's bosom. The rich man also died and was buried. Abraham said to the rich man, "Son, remember. Son, remember thy lifetime. Abraham said, "Between us and you, there is a great gulf fixed. There is a great gulf." The rich man said, "I have 5 brethren. He may testify unto them. Let them hear." Abraham said, "If they hear not Moses and the prophets, neither will they be persuaded, though one rose from the dead." A rich man, a poor man, who longed to satisfy his hunger. Dogs lick his sores. Both die. "Father Abraham, have mercy on me." Abraham said, "Child, remember, during your lifetime, you received good things, Lazarus evil things. Child, remember, remember, remember. Besides, there is a great chasm. Those who might want to pass from here to you cannot. No one can cross from there to us. A great chasm, fixed. My 5 brothers, if they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead. Again, this is a different Lazarus than the Lazarus we meet who is raised from the dead in the Gospel of John. But I want to take a moment and allow, if either Ollie or Sarah or someone online would like to share, then you're welcome. You're welcome if you're watching on YouTube to share in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, you're welcome to share as well, because people often watch the recording later and they might read your comments there.
I'll just say a couple words. Yeah, it's a powerful story. And it's one that I don't have. I mean, I know it, but I don't know it. It's not a common one that I know. So, yeah, very powerful. So I'm glad you shared it. I think I'm going to muse on it a little bit more before I share more.
It kind of makes me a little scared a little bit. The story does, because I like to think that hell, or whatever people want to refer to it as, like, doesn't exist. You know, like if you ask for forgiveness, but it makes me, think that it does. And I know that Jesus spoke about it too. But being like empathetic, you feel bad for the guy. I don't know. It made me think about Scrooge. I always like that story, and I try to watch it every year. And growing up, we always went downtown and watched it live. And but the difference is that Scrooge actually had another chance, whereas this guy doesn't. Yeah, it's a very, very, very strong. It's very powerful, but I have noticed that I've tried to stay away from it a little bit because of how hard of a message it is.
I'll offer a few thoughts, and I have a little bit of a unfair advantage in that I'm picking these readings and getting to muse on them for hours, if not days, while you folks are just hearing them right now, not knowing what's coming. And I think there's advantages to both that because you get the kind of the spontaneous reactions too. But I'll just share a couple of thoughts that I've had so far. One is I also thought of the Christmas Carol, and I also thought if we think of the poor man as being like Ebenezer Scrooge's partner, Marley, I think it was Marley. It's what Abraham says is true, that Scrooge doesn't change after Marley visits. That one visit doesn't do it. I mean, here is even someone returning from the dead, and of course we have allusions to Jesus here, but we also have a person returns from the dead, and it's not enough. It's not enough for Ebenezer to change, and so it's interesting. I found myself thinking about what Abraham says. Is the first thing he says child or son. So he has this kind of this connection. He doesn't speak to him like this stranger. He calls him child or he calls him son. And the first thing he says to him, I think it's the first thing he says, is remember. And here's my little take on this. One is, Jesus tells this story, so he may be telling it as a parable. So it's not necessarily a story of a man who is in hell. So it could be a parable to teach us. So there's a little bit of an out I'm giving myself in terms of, I'd like to think that no one is in a hell realm. But also the idea of remember, and I'm going to actually go back to our Psalm reading, if I may, Psalm 143 and verse 5. I remember the days of old. I think about all your deeds. I meditate on the works of your hands. I remember the days of old. And sometimes we may have heard remember, to member again, to become whole again. And what happens if we do remember? If we not just remember, oh yeah, I had it good, this guy had it crappy, and I didn't do much about it, but if we remember with compassion. And Abraham's clear, there's a chasm here. We can't cross to you, you can't cross to us. And I found myself thinking of the line of, again, a rich man. A rich man, it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to make it into the kingdom. Well, and when Jesus says this, the disciples say, well, then that's a done deal then. And Jesus says, no. What Jesus says right after that is, with God, all things are possible. And so this idea of this impossible chasm, it may be impossible for Lazarus, it may be impossible for Abraham, but for the great sacred, maybe there is a possibility of crossing over. So that was part of my thinking about that, and that it feels like that remembering might be might have something to do with it. Also, in terms of like, oh, this is a hard, terrible story. It is. Well, I don't know if it's a terrible story, but it's a tough story. But I also read Albert Schweitzer, who you may know was a doctor, worked in Africa, saved so many lives, devoted his life. He was really a holy man. I found that this particular story is the one that inspired Schweitzer. He read this and he thought, Lazarus in this story, that's what's happening to the people of Africa. And I'm being the rich man in the purple robe. And that changed everything for Schweitzer. And probably, and if we think of how many, I don't know how many people have been influenced by Albert Schweitzer, but it's tons of people, right? And so here again, what is Jesus's intention? So we get back to Sarah's lovely question from a couple weeks ago. What does this have to do with me and my life? How does this relate to me and what I'm doing here in the world? Is it just supposed to scare the crap out of me that if I'm a lousy human being, I'm going to go to hell? I don't think that's Jesus's intention. But I think Schweitzer took it and said, whoa, okay, here's what I'm going to do. And I just heard on the news today, they're talking about Sudan. And they were saying, we're all thinking about various places around the world. Many of us are thinking about Gaza and we're thinking about Ukraine, and we should be thinking about these places. But in Sudan, they're saying we are on the cusp, if this terrible war in Sudan continues, we are on the cusp of millions being at risk of starvation because roads would be cut off, etc. And that the woman on public radio that I heard today said this could be the worst humanitarian crisis in history. And again, sometimes you never know, is she right? I don't know. But obviously very, very bad. And again, there's this whole thing of what can I do? I'm just some guy sitting here in Ohio, just some person sitting here. But I think we're invited into those questions. So.
Well, it's kind of like a wake up story. Just wake up and be kind and be generous. Be grateful. Do what you can. So, yeah, I certainly don't, in my theology, I don't think of a hell round afterwards. I think of a hell realm here on earth. That people get themselves in, but yeah, just wake up, listen to these words and be kind. I like the story about Albert Schweitzer. That's very powerful, very powerful. So yeah, it's gotta motivate us and not put us in despair. So always, so yeah. And I've been looking on YouTube. I haven't seen any comments yet, but I'm looking. So.
I'll share one other thing from a version of the Christmas Carol. There's a version with Henry Winkler. Those of you of a certain age know the Fonz. And it's called An American Christmas Carol. It's set during the Great Depression. And I like getting to see all these different versions. I watch at least one every year. And I believe it's in that one. And I'm paraphrasing here. where they say something about hell, and what they say is something like this, is that heaven or hell, what it is it's experiencing what you have done to others. It's to truly experience the full range of everything that you have done to others. And so all the good, all the things that you have done that have added to the good, that would be sort of your heavenly experience. And all the harm, all the pain that we have caused, and we've all done both, right? That's the hell of it. And then you think of like somebody who was like a horrific dictator who, did harm to, thousands or more people, to experience every single bit of that. Like, oh my gosh. And the other thing I want to add here, and this is again my own theology, and I'm drawing from Matthew. I don't know if this is, I know Matthew a little bit better than Luke on this. I'm not sure if it's said in Luke this way. But in Matthew, from the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about when you're disagreeing with an adversary, or you need to be reconciled with your brother, it says, agree with thine adversary quickly whilst thou art in the way with him, lest at any time the adversary deliver thee to the judge, and the judge deliver thee to the officer, and thou be cast into prison. And again, this sounds very hell realm. And then he says, verily I say unto thee, thou shalt by no means come out thence. You're there. And he says, by no means thou shalt come out. But then it says, till thou hast paid the uttermost farthing. So I wonder, I don't get to know in this human form, but I wonder if there may be this idea that, like karma in Buddhist tradition, like you have to deal with whatever you've dealt out here. And it may be a lot, but it has an endpoint. And I kind of, in my little human brain, that kind of makes some sort of sense. So. I'll give it another minute if either of you have any other comments, or if we see any other comments up, and then I'll offer a closing prayer.
I appreciate the reflections. I do appreciate, because I have a hard time sometimes when I hear things that, hear parts of the Bible that I don't quite understand or that seem harsh. And I really appreciate the reflections in making it a way that I can understand and process. So thank you.
Yeah, I just agree with that. I'm just thinking about it. So I don't have a comment. I'm just thinking.
And that's so valuable too, right? That we don't always have to have an answer or reflection. And sometimes we'll sit with this and, today's Wednesday, or you might be watching this recording, whenever, and it might be 3 days later or 3 months later that, oh my gosh, something pops into you about that. And again, what are we doing with this? Like Ollie said, if we're just feeling down about it, or, I don't think that's what's intended for this as sacred teaching. I think it's intended, what happened with Albert Schweitzer, to bring out the best in us. How can this, because some people might say, oh my gosh, what a terrible, I don't want to think about that. Maybe without that, maybe if that's nixed out, maybe if chapter 16 of Luke ends with verse 18 and there's no 19 through 31, maybe if that's not in the Bible, thousands upon thousands of people in Africa who received care, who were made healthy, who lived longer lives would not have. Maybe without these words on this page, it may have spelled the difference between life and death for thousands of people. That's wild. And that, I kind of just picture Jesus smiling about. I'll offer us a prayer. Oh, great Spirit, remind us to be humble. Remind us that whatever our understandings are, they are very, very limited. But as the psalmist said, help us to reach out toward the great sacred. Remind us that we're connected with this vastness that encompasses everything. The people of Sudan, the moths emerging from the cocoon, the people speaking languages that we don't understand, and our own limited understandings. We wrestle with these teachings not to prove anything, but to help us on the path. May this time we spend in reflection help us to be a little kinder, a little more compassionate, a little more aware of the great sacrality within us and all around us. Oh, great Spirit, there's so much that we know is in need of love and kindness and compassion. And help us to also recognize the need for wonder that you invite us into. Curiosity, caring, and simple awe. Simple awe. For all of this, we give thanks. And we give thanks for this time together and this opportunity to share with each other. Peace and amen and amen.
Thank you, Michael and Ollie. And thank you for the grace the last couple weeks.
Oh,
I have.
Thank you, Sarah. It's so nice to see you. That beautiful day out there on your porch.
I know, right? Now I'm going to go take Byron for a walk and ponder.
All right.
And then story time at Whetstone Library. I'm taking my niece and nephew, Michael, who's 2, and Margie is 7. Halloween story time tonight.
Oh, very nice.
That's how I met your daughter.
Oh.
Ah,
because Edie did it there.
You did it. Yeah, she's done that. Yes.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. And Michael, you gotta shut it down. You're the host.
All right. Thank you, folks, as well. And we hope this has been